I would say welcome to all of our viewers today. Today's session, I am talking with Jacco and with Niclas. And today's topic is pricing models. First of all, my name is Kevin. Pleasure to meet you, to e-meet you. I'm the commercial director for Younium. And with me first, please, Jacco, do we still need to introduce you? Because I assume every SaaS company by now has a photo on the wall of you, or am I mistaken here?
Oh, you're too kind. But yeah, no, my name is Jacco. I'm the founder of Winning by Design. Started the company in 2011, 12-ish, and focused 100% on recurring revenue, and particularly in high tech. So obviously among our customers are the world's biggest and well-known SaaS companies who we help in all kinds of stages of growth.
Super, thank you. I'm a big fan of your books, as you know. It's not the first time that we met. I'm actually looking for an afternoon to finish this one. Thank you for joining us today. And on the other hand, Niclas, also not the first time that we've met.
We've met a few times. Good to see you again. So Niclas, founder and CEO of Younium, long timer in the software SaaS industry. Also I really like pricing.
Right.
Pricing and packaging, and it gets so much more interesting when you get into SaaS and recurring revenue, and you have these relationships over time, right? That adds quite a few perspectives on pricing. So really looking forward to this.
Exactly, and that's the precise reason why I invited you both for today's meeting, today's session. I'm still a lot in touch with direct customers, potential clients, and it's a recurring topic every time. Pricing models. And I think by the time everyone has finalized their pricing model, at least 6 months later, there's another round of the same discussion. So today, knowledge sharing, we want to have an open discussion about this topic, the do's, the don'ts, the things that you should take into consideration, long-term, short-term. And we just want to kick off the topic with the real impact of pricing on SaaS growth. So number one, Jacco, let's kick off with you. What do you see happening at this moment as a trend in pricing and packaging?
Okay, so a good point. I use a different term for it to set the stage correctly. It's not that pricing and packaging is wrong. I think that, but there's more to it. And although we can focus today on pricing and packaging, in my world, I start thinking of it as a monetization strategy. And that monetization strategy can have elements of pricing, packaging, payment terms, everything is associated with that. But first and foremost is, what is your monetization strategy? In my world of thinking today, simplified, there are 3 forms of monetization strategy to set the stage. One is you pay upfront and you own the product. This is an ownership-based model. You buy the car, you buy the router, and so on and so forth. Number 2, you subscribe to it. You have a monthly, quarterly, annually fee with certain terms associated with it. You don't own the product. The product is owned by somebody else, but you subscribe to the ownership of the product. And then number 3 is a form of consumption-based pricing. You don't even subscribe to it. You only pay for a certain outcome. In the old days, that could be a click. Like if you look at your phone, the telco infrastructure in the world with phones that took quarters, that's a form of a consumption model. These 3 models can have very different behavior, strategic behavior on a company. And to switch between these models, to go from an ownership model, for example, to a subscription-based model, very few companies have been able to do that successfully. I would argue Adobe was the first and the biggest today that has made that. And I'm not taking into accounts what Apple has done and whatnot. I'm just taking B2B kind of companies. Yes. That sets the stage, right? 3 categories.
Agree. Very clear indeed. And I think it's always good to zoom out one step further then, right? When you're in the middle of this discussion. Niclas, your take on this. So what we tend to hear more and more often, right? Indeed, all the way from perpetual licensing to pay-per-use and everything in between, so to say. What we tend to see more and more, what I hear in conversations is also a mix of these. So, right, a set fee for maybe an annual license or maybe, right, biannual or whatever, with a set of what we refer to as, right, usage components or pay as you go. What is your perspective on this? Do you see this happening as often in the United States as in Europe?
I would say that as with many things, I think the US is ahead of Europe. I think it's the same thing for this, right? With a very clear focus on like cash flow and like really getting value from what you're buying, etc. I think would love to say that Europe is ahead, but I do think the US is a bit ahead here. But I think it's interesting also like having the mix. Because I totally agree with like those three distinctions of a monetization model. Absolutely correct. And I think what many companies are really looking into, like, okay, so how to do it and like in what order to do it and to what extent to do it. And I do think that a lot of businesses out there haven't like an idea of, oh, we would like to do this, but they don't really get over the hill. They don't know, they don't feel maybe comfortable doing a small experiment, or they don't know how to do a small experiment, and it becomes really, really, really large. You don't want to like bet the whole house on the new pricing model necessarily, right? So I think there are so much to talk about here, but I do think when we meet a lot of companies out there, they are looking like, how can we add on a variable component to our recurring fixed billing, right? Or vice versa. Okay, so we've been doing, you know, paying for API calls, but it's like we would like a component that is a bit more recurring, that reflects the platform we're also providing, etc. Right? So we definitely see a lot of companies out there wanting to have that mix and maybe introducing a component on top of the other as well.
What I think is a super interesting point here, that it's not as easy to say, right, this is our current price point, let's say annual licensing, and now we're shifting to usage billing, all right, the consumption based, and boom, this is the price point that we should go for. Jacco,
Yeah, so like,
just
look,
from the very start, like from the
Yeah,
very start, how do you set the price for your product?
let's take a quick step back. Why do we price things? Like, why do we need to price things? Is, long story short, we want to make a profit. We can't, you know, like, and so we need to calculate the cost over a period of time, and then we need to add whatever we deem the profit needs to be, and then we have a total price, right? And so think of the basic concept here. We want to make a profit. Now, I'll use the SaaS subscription model, and I oversimplify it to the tune, right? But like, imagine if I buy a $25,000 to $50,000 annual subscription-based product, something in that range, right? Not a $5 Canva subscription, not like a $250,000 a year software package or higher, right? I'm buying a regular CRM, ERP, applicant tracking system, whatever it is, right? Pay 25, 50K for it. When I do that, I have to assume what we call a horizon. I have to set a horizon. You have to. You can't say, oh, my horizon is infinite. And a horizon, what that means is I got to grab an amount of time in the X amount of years and say, that is the going rate that my customer needs to stay by. So for example, in the past, when you bought your first cell phone, right, like you set a rate for it's about 2 years. An economic life cycle of a, you know, like of a cell phone is longer, but you put a horizon on it for 2 years. After 2 years, I'm going to buy a new one, right? But you have a computer, I would say 3 years on average, right? When you have a TV, 5 to 10 years. You don't buy a new TV every years, right? Like, and so you have to set a horizon. Once you set a horizon, you then have to assume what the profit is and what the cost of those are. So for example, if I say I'm selling a $20,000 solution and I do it over 5 years, that would be $100,000. I add an increase in price annually, $140,000 is the economic lifetime value of that customer, right? That's where I derive the pricing from, right? Like that's where that comes from. And so like that mindset then of how we are going to create an economic incentive for the customers to buy, whether it's give it free for the first year or for all that care, give it free for 4 years and then charge $140,000 in the last year, that could be a pricing strategy. I wouldn't recommend it, but it could be a pricing strategy. But everything in between then, becomes a monetization strategy. How do we get that? That monetization strategy is almost always based on the following. Does the customer get impact out of the product immediately? And how much do I need to invest in it upfront? Because I need to invest $100,000 in year one and then wait till year 5 to make a profit. That's going to be a painful pricing strategy, right? Like then I need to change my pricing strategy. But first things first, a horizon. And in most markets, I think we have to start thinking and considering what our horizons are of the different products. And if I would be a company like yours, I would start recommending horizons, right? It says like, okay, this kind of product, this category, this amount of horizon, because otherwise we cannot build a business model to support it, right? And now if we go back before I hand it back, if we went back 10 years ago, we didn't know how long SaaS contracts were going to be. And so we let everything figure itself out. Today we should know. Today we should know is like, hey, a customer is going to stay with our product XYZ, right? That will set the stage, for example, for usage-based pricing, and as we're going to in a second. And I tell you where it comes from. Usage-based pricing comes from usage-based cost. We do not know how many people or how much the cost of AI is going to be while it's being sold to us in small increments. We are consuming the cost. So we cannot put a fixed price on it on the outside because we don't know if the customer will go crazy on that price. That means I got an uncontrollable input cost that I cannot put a fixed price on. That's the reason why we're sitting here. That's the reason why this pricing conversation today is so evident, it's becoming so much of an issue based by ChatGPT, who won't have a usage-based problem limitation, right? But all the other listeners down here go like, I don't know if I'm going to support, I don't know if I'm going to have that much usage that I can guarantee, right? Like, so I'm going like, hey, everybody, enthusiasm in control. You're not ChatGPT. Like, you don't have Google and Apple and Apple and everybody else using you, right, as a backbone, right? Like, anyway, so that sets the stage a little bit.
Isn't it also interesting? Like, I mean, over the years, we've had so much discussions regarding pricing that you should not do your cost plus pricing. You should really look at the value, and like what you were saying now. Okay, what we're seeing now when it comes to variable billing and usage billing is that it's very much driven by cost and making sure that we cover that cost. Very like passive way of targeting pricing right now because of that uncertainty, right? So I think like what we see today regarding this may not be what we see in like 10 years, right? And I guess you also have that other thing with outcome-based pricing, which is like, I guess, the dream for everyone, but not always that easy, right? Maybe with the perfect AI agent that does everything end to end, fine.
I think we're going to see a lot more cost
some
plus
evolvement around this.
I think we're going to see a lot more cost plus, unfortunately. And why is that? And all this is we're just setting the stage for the world to understand what is going on. We're not, we won't be capable of providing instant solutions here. What I can say is as following. We had, last we checked, we had about 36 to 40,000 SaaS companies. Those 36 to 40,000 SaaS companies pretty much at this point in time are all seen as AI companies with SaaS contracts, right? Like it's the way they position themselves, they now have become AI companies with SaaS. And then we have another, give it another like 6 months, but let's assume that we have a 10,000 additional AI native companies. So finger in the air, wet finger in the air is 50,000 software companies that are vying for it. Folks, we will see a race to the bottom on pricing, right? And it's already happening. We already see that. So it's not like even like a future telling. This is what's happening. So the race to the bottom is there. And what you'll see, what the problem for that is, we're going to see a battle between the main two things, because pricing is everybody needs to reset its pricing, right? They're all following each other down, right? And so what is then the difference? The difference will be with the brand that is trusted, like the known brand that we know, right? Like, okay, that one you will be willing to pay, something for, and the brand that is most innovative. And what you'll see historically, those two things are at odds with each other, because trusted brands don't innovate. Like, it's not the Hilton who came up with the Airbnb, right? And it's not like Disney who came up with Netflix, right? Like, so the brand we trust will be going up against the brand of the innovation, right? That's the battle scene of the price. And those brands we trust, we're willing to pay more for, right? We pay for Apple phones and stuff more than for anything else. And then those who are innovate, we're going to pay for, the additional features, the cool look and feel, the modern stuff. And that's the battlefield of the pricing. I oversimplify this, but I'm just trying to set the stage for our listeners to go like, hey, now I got like I call them first principles. These are first principles of the field that we're playing in.
I agree. And I think you mentioned something super interesting here, because there's a little bit more than just pricing, right? And sending an invoice basically, right, to this. So, right, let's say we are a typical SaaS company, we are selling, right, in an annual license manner, and we're shifting a little bit more towards potentially, right, either having components as pay-as-you-go or completely. There's another potentially upside to this. So what effect, Niclas, let's take you, what effect do you think it has on cost if we say we are shifting now to a consumption-based model? And what I mean by that is something that Jacco talks a lot around, especially your first books, right? The customer acquisition cost, but also the customer retention cost. What does it mean if we shift to a model that is way easier to purchase in our customer acquisition cost?
So in terms of us selling, and what would our cost be whether we shifted into that model fully, right? I guess ideally you would like to say that, okay, so friction goes down, lead times are shorter, more sales volume, and that would make up for a drop in price, right? So deal size times the volume would be the end result. So hopefully you would see a rise in volume and a drop in deal size. Maybe for the same cost. But I do think like all tech companies over the last 10 years have been pretty good at increasing costs, regardless of how they've done their customer acquisition processes, etc. Right? So I think it would be, for many, quite a lot of transition costs in getting into that. So I don't think you would like see immediate effects like, okay, oh wow, this is now super cheap, high volume, this is great. I don't think so, because I think most companies don't really have the infrastructure for introducing changes. That comes to like the process of doing it. We're not used to doing it. So like every time we do it, it's like, oh, this is a new thing. It's not something that we do every month, every week, something. And the other thing, I think, like lack of data. So I'm just looking back at my career. It's like quite often you don't have the data. So all of a sudden you're going to make really, really tough decisions on lack of data, right? Which is risky and somewhat difficult. And then thirdly, I think like, okay, let's assume you still get to this idea, okay, we should do A, we shouldn't do B, right? But then just like execution, I think that is very often underestimated. That's at least my experience. The easiest thing was to do the price list, or the price model, or the formula, or the spreadsheet, or the calculator. That was like the easy part. Getting everyone to do it, everyone to talk about it. And I think I talked about, I really like to have a narrative around why do we have the pricing we do have. So yeah, that was a very good question. I think it would definitely be quite an uptake in cost for quite some time. And then, of course, if you're the winner, if you do it the best, and if you end up on that side, right, then of course you will have benefits from it. But it sounds like you have a lot of knowledge about this as well, Jacco. So please.
Yeah. And perhaps to help you, and perhaps also to encourage and provide confidence in what's happening. I'll give you this example, and this is an example not related to pricing, but it's an example related to where the solution lies. So we have an internship program, and we take some of the fantastic interns that BYU, a renowned university in Salt Lake City, provides. And so we have one of those interns, the smartest intern we ever have, capable and whatnot, right? And he is advising our company right now on a strategy. And the right strategy, right person and whatnot. But I'm sitting on the phone with him yesterday, and I described to him the problem that we as an industry have. And the problem we have in industry have is as follows. When he joins our company and he provides his mathematical insight to us, he is instantly on the top of the pyramid insight winning by design, recommending and what is happening. If I put the same skill set inside the Toyota facility, where manufacturing takes place with pinpoint precision, he would be an intern that will have to learn for 2 years before he gets to touch any real machinery.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We are so immature
Yep.
in our processes, in our thinking, that can happen, and that shouldn't happen. First thing we need to do, pricing should not be based on what people's opinions are on, pricing should be based on mathematical calculation, making strong assumptions that be verified every quarter, every month, every day if it needs to be. But it needs to be based on a properly foundational scientific principles, not on what people say. It's like, oh, I think I can get that for it. That will get you to $1 million. Congratulations. It's also known that those customers that get you to $1 million will churn within the first year by like 70 to 80% because you make them promises to things that you can't do. So we know that, hey, it's fantastic and all this, like war language or manly language, but alpha language, a better way of saying it. Alpha language of like, oh, I'm charging whatever I can get to sit in front of the customer. And I said $500,000. Yeah, that's fantastic, but that's not scalable to get you to $100 or $200 million, right? Like, congratulations, it got you to a couple of $1 million. But once you go beyond 10, $20 million in revenue in Europe, I would say, like, you call it 5 million euros. You need to have somebody calculate this out and run the numbers and understand that, right? And although it's not cost plus based pricing, you do want to make sure that you're making a profit at the end based on a reasonable lifetime value of the customer, right? Based on like 5 years. We currently see that if you currently look at the NRR metrics that we're getting, then we are noticing and notifying our customers, you are at the increasing cost of acquisition, you are looking at 15, 16, 17 years that this customer needs to stay with you, right? Like, it's a good product, but I don't know if that is, do your investors know this, right? Like, are they aware that is the length? That means you got a pricing issue. When you have that, you have a pricing issue.
Yeah.
Right.
and I mean, in SaaS software tech, like, claiming that you're going to be relevant for more than 20 years is quite a big bet. You don't really have that many proof points of that, right?
You say that to a person who used to work for Philips, who no longer, that is no longer present. And I just worked for Technicolor, a 109-year-old company that just went bankrupt a week ago, right? Like, literally the company that is the foundation of all movies and production just went bankrupt, right? Closed the doors. We live in a world that things change faster. How many of you are still, like, I went from working nonstop in Google, doing all my searches, to being, like, nowadays I go to Google and I do 2 things and I'm back in ChatGPT to doing my work, right? Like, we would not have expected that 3 years ago, people. In 3 years ago, what we know as Google, the dominant thing, and I know somebody will look it up and tell me, like, Google is still big. Yeah, that's because they rely on the 90% of people who are not capable at. But all of us, we live and breathe nowadays in forms of AI, ChatGPT, Perplexity, whatever you do your work in.
There's a life cycle to everything, right?
You're cutting on a super interesting case there or topic. Is right. One is right. We change our pricing model and has an effect on potentially, right, Niclas, day-to-day operations, perhaps shorter sales cycles. Maybe customers will stay longer or maybe not. And that brings us to a whole another discussion, not only on day-to-day operations and right internally, how does this go, but how are externals looking at this, right? How does this affect our evaluation of the company and investor? Again, I think Niclas, right, as we spoke about before, there are unicorn examples in the world that are right completely based on usage billing and get great evaluation. But does it mean if I'm changing my model today to right usage components that I get that same evaluation? So, Jacco,
Yeah, I'll lead
yeah.
here and hand it off to Niclas so that he can put this in perspective from a pricing perspective. But first things first, why am I paying you something? I'm not paying you something because I love the fact of paying. I'm paying you something because I want to get something back for it, right? And so, for example, I pay for SpaceX on my van, right? I get the Starlink. I don't use it every day, right? But when I use it, I really need it, and there's no other option for me to get it. That is an example of I get the impact that I want. I think I pay $150 a month for it. That seems a lot of money, but if you put that into the perspective that every now and then I got to talk to somebody while I'm on the road, you know, like $150 a month for one conversation is not that much then, right? Okay. What you'll see here is the concept of two fundamental things. Number one, I get something in return, and what I get in return makes it valuable for the price that I pay you, okay? And number two, what I get from you is prioritized as it's a form of a priority for me. If I would be at home every day, then I don't need to pay $150 a month for once a year a backup network, right? I don't need that. But today I do, right? And so I need to think that through as like, hey, how would that work? So two things, impact in return for, do I get the impact? That impact sets a priority. Now, what we see today, a few things are happening, and that's the reason why this pricing is fundamental to this pricing. Number one, there's a lot of things that I ask for a priority. There's a lot of SaaS services. So the question is it a priority? And number two is, do I actually get the impact you tell me I'm telling, right? Now, I give you an idea because Niclas said earlier, make a point, it's like, hey, as you know, like the win rate, you know, is affected, or the barrier to entry is lower if you lower the price. I want us to understand that we work on a continuum. On the left, you have a pay up front. On the right of that continuum, consider it an arc or something like that. You have get it for free, right? And somewhere along the arc, as you go, like as you change from monetization strategy that is ownership based to subscription based to consumption based. At the end on the far right, there's a freemium model. You get it for free. Okay, I just want you to know the freemium to paid conversion is the worst conversion of all. It is the worst. Call it 1 in 100, right? And so what we see is companies like Slack, if they're using an example, their product-led growth motion and their pricing motion and the way how much impact you get every day out of it working, and the fact there was nothing else, other than a few consumer-based solutions like that, right, made it a no-brainer for that. That doesn't mean that if you have a product that doesn't sit in front of the customer every day, that you can charge the same price and use the same model and expect the same results, right? No. That was the unicorn. Slack was the unicorn, and everybody else now has to learn how to live with this. And they have the volume and the commitment from the customer and the stickiness. You can't start on day one and expect that to happen to you, right? That's completely, irresponsible to your investors. These are all thoughts that we need to integrate in the soup of our pricing strategy, right? And I think that provides a framework, a perspective of what our customers and your customers can start working with.
Yeah. I mean, those network effects should not be forgotten either. Like if you have network effects, that creates something very, very different for you, like Slack have nowadays. You kind of assume everyone being able to have a Slack channel with each other outside your own organization, and all of a sudden you get other effects that tie you into it as well. So, but like going back also to the investor part of it, as I would see it, I mean, I think all investors would like to have as predictable, as high revenue as possible. That's like at a great margin, right? at a great price. That kind of sums it up if you make it really, really simple. And then I think like when you introduce usage and you don't have those high volumes, because if you have enough volumes, it becomes almost like a recurring revenue. You have so much statistics that you can make all these fancy mathematical things with it, right? But I guess like for most companies, you will not have that in the beginning. So I think it will definitely get treated as like a not as nice form of revenue as the more fixed recurring revenue. And I think that is something to take into consideration as well. And I mean, it's got other implications as well. Like for quite some time, we said that, okay, well, as long as you can prove you have, you know, a good LTV to CAC ratio, you can always get money to finance your business up until then. And then we saw like 2 years ago, no, you can't get money for everything. All of a sudden, you actually have to start working as a normal company where you have money to spend, right? So I think that is also a component of this, like, okay, so not only deal by deal, not only revenue versus cost, but also like cash flow. Because most companies, even though with AI and agents, they still have a ramp up time, right? I mean, some companies are doing great out there, but I mean, like a big chunk, you need to look into. It's supposed to also finance you through these different stages, and it's very different if you're like in the first stage, the second, third, like so. So I think you have to adapt. Make sure you adapt along the way. But maybe you shouldn't focus too much on what the investors say. Maybe you should focus more on like how to build a sustainable business. That's probably hard enough.
It's a fantastic, it's an absolute eloquent point, Nicola. I think that when you hire a salesperson, you're at like less than $1 million in revenue, right? And when you hire a salesperson, you're not guaranteed that salesperson is going to be profitable. The acquisition, if you can, like the recruiting, the onboarding, the development, right? And the person works 2 years from you, like it's not a guarantee. But early on, when you are at $1 million in revenue, that's fine. You take that risk, right? When you're at $100 million or $200 million and you have 50 salespeople, you take the risk because your average will be fine. Yeah. Pricing should be seen as the same thing. Early on, you can absolutely put in usage-based pricing, and that may not be considered a profit proposal. But yeah, if you're in that early startup phase, what you want to do, you don't want to make a profit. You want to create a growth rate of coverages of customers, of users and whatnot. And so you may invest in a usage-based pricing model the same way that you invest in hiring a salesperson who may not sell. And so but what you can do in that case is you learn from the consumption behavior of a customer, right? Like ChatGPT started on a usage-based platform, and we all we're confused about how many millions of tokens we had to buy. Today we pay whatever $20, $150, $200 per month, and they have moved back to a subscription-based pricing, right? So you go the thought here is it is okay to use consumption-based pricing, subscription-based pricing, even if you want to go back to pay upfront unlimited pricing. We see that nowadays too, that people say a lifetime package or something like that, right? Of that software version, by the way, right? Like 3 software versions later, we go like, well, we no longer support that software package. But the point is like all that is a strategy. And if we go back to the point I think we all agreed to earlier on, is like, pick it with an assumption in mind, and pick it with a calculation that you have performed, and give it with a strategy that you have in mind. Don't just pick it because it's the coolest thing. And there's these, in this case, 3 gentlemen speaking on the podcast about what pricing strategy they would do, right? And why, Klarma does it X, and why, like a SaaS subscription company does it Y, and this cool vendor, this cool founder said something. Calculated.
I think that's such a great point, because I think like when you talk about pricing, that's like the ultimate learning, right? When it comes to pricing, then you will know. You will get like either people buy or they don't buy. Like up until then, it could be like, well, maybe talking, but when it comes to pricing, that's where you can do so much learnings, and that's what you want to do, right? You want to continuously learn and understand what's happening. And I think what you said, like if you're doing that like with an idea, with a clear notion of what you want to achieve and why you've done it, you will also be able to take in those learnings and use them to maybe change your pricing, make alterations, make adaptations, and try again. And then you get into this more iterative approach as well. Like probably you won't get it right the first time, right? You will have to work with it and then, you know, change, and the world changes, your customer change, your partners introduce something, etc. Competitors do something, but having that iterative mindset as well, and like having that idea and that design, right? Awesome.
No, you touch on a great point, and perhaps you know, like putting my kimono open down here, Niclas. It like winning by design had its own pricing strategy. Like we are advising companies, but we're running into the same issues. And so historically, a consulting project with winning by design, if we would help a company to grow from, let's say, 20 million to 200 million or something like that, right? We would charge a large upfront project fee. It would be a consulting project with a project remuneration against it, right? And the project remuneration against it fundamentally is based on, you know, like human capacity that needs to be put into motion. Today, we sell it at $100,000 annual subscription a year, right? Like it's an advisory service. Two things we noticed, right? If you think about it, when we do it for the customer, that's a consulting project. When you do it for a customer, well, let me ask you, what is the adoption level higher? When we do it for a customer or when we teach them how to do it? At which point in time that the customer adopts at a higher rate?
When they've learned.
When they've learned.
Yeah.
And so, and what we learned is that, you know, in the impact mindset, we delivered a bigger impact by doing it for them on a shorter time frame. But as a result, the adoption actually went down, whereas we helped them do it and, you know, like teach them how to fish rather than fishing for them in the old proverb, right? Then the adoption gets higher. We can now lower the price because we don't have to do all the work. And suddenly the machine starts to work again. Like that is a change in pricing strategy and payment strategy that suddenly removes hurdles that not too long ago, the older model was preferred, but the economy changed and AI has a role to play in this, right? That's the beauty of understanding pricing and making that jump. And I can tell you it's not easy. That's going to take us, you know, we're in the process now, but it takes us 6 to 12 months, right, to do that. I think in the same way, your customers and the listeners to this podcast should take that example into account and go like, am I really delivering the impact with the current pricing, or am I holding them back? Is my pricing holding them back to buy more because they have higher expectations? When you'll see that in front of you the same way as I explained it, then I believe pricing. And I believe in trends in the future, and then I'm handing it back to you, Niclas. Trends in the future, we are going to expect. Folks, get ready for gasoline-like pricing. Get ready for, it cost $10,000 yesterday, it costs $14,000 today to tomorrow. I have no idea what I'm going to charge you by the end of next week, people. But if you want it at 14,000, you better sign up for it today, because my costs are constantly changing in a world of, right? Like, and I got to run up those costs. I can't keep investing in customers. Now, up to 5, 10 I can, but after that, so get used to highly dynamic and variable pricing in a world where the resources are constantly changing and companies have to adjust to that.
Buckle up.
Totally agree with that. It's going to be quite exciting, I think. Isn't this, I mean, if you want to look at it from a very, like, from the good side, I mean, that's what competition is like, right? Competition and driving, you know, advancements. And I think we're seeing that, right?
That's absolutely right. I think competition is your market forces is the trend, because competition is one important market force. But you know, like we see, government has a role to play in market forces. Geopolitical situation has a role to play in it. Legislation on, you know, like what people get paid, minimum wages, what the rights are of workers, right? Like as you know, like as we now start to see in Western Europe. The exposure that employers have to their employees by far exceed what can be perceived as normal, right? Like you can't, you know, if you let go of a person, you can't have 6, 9, 12 months of pay. That is just not right for an employer sector, right? Like and so anyway, so like we'll see all these things are about to change, and with that fundamentally the cost structure changes, the risk changes, and therefore the monetization strategy will change. And I think we see that we're in the middle of that major transformation in the next 6 to 12 months as AI replaces people. And I say it out loud, folks, because I hear this conversation all the time. Oh, AI doesn't replace people. It creates additional work. It does create additional work for a new employee that has been trained for it.
Yeah.
It's going to replace a whole bunch of people who currently are like stuck in the job and are doing that. Like, yes, it's like trying to tell the world digging a hole with an excavator will not replace people who did it with a shovel before. No, folks, it will. But now the people who were operating the shovel will now do something different. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they will.
I think like, well, what got you here won't get you there either. And I think we all have to really like look into, and maybe I think you know, in general, been somewhat lazy when it comes to pricing as well. In that sense, like, hey, let's have 75% of all companies settle on a per seat model, and then we go from there, and then we build all our playbooks, and we all do the same thing. That's not entirely the case, but I think like when things get tougher, there will be more variations. You have to find all the small things. You have to optimize much more in every detail, in every phase. So like getting to work, getting to like dig up those insights, thinking about like what is the design, what is the narrative, why are we pricing like this, and get going, right?
And
Because you
Nicholas,
want to have a few iterations before it gets even harder, right? It's not easy, and like getting the data, getting the feedback, that's a cycle, right? And you wanna get quite a few cycles
and
as soon as
Nicholas,
possible.
here's where the problem comes in. If you have product-led growth, this is not a relatively low challenge to change pricing. If you have a human-led growth motion with salespeople, folks, you're tinkering with comp plans that are annually agreed to. You're tinkering with quotas that have financial commitments and legal exposure to it. And suddenly the whole world starts to unravel, right? We can't, okay, I can't change from $100,000, project to a $10,000 fee because my comp plans are not structured that way. What you'll see every year, planning and strategy seasons, like late Q3, early Q4, a lot of the cycles of management are assigned to getting quotas, regions, and whatnot, right? Like at least 2 months, people are working on that. If we impacting that with a pricing strategy, that has huge impact on that, right? Like long story short, human beings are the long pole in the tent. They're holding up these things. They're delaying these processes.
Yeah.
In some cases, that is great. Some cases that's great. That allows us to rethink it over. In a world where the windows of opportunity are getting smaller, right? Like smaller, not bigger, and that they are moving at a rapid pace. Companies need to be responsive to those opportunities, to windows of opportunity, and they can't if you can't change the pricing strategy because we're only going to adjust quotas 6 to 12 months from now, right? And therefore you got to wait till next cycle. Excuse me, it takes nowadays a year. The AI companies are coming into the market within like 6, 9, 12 months time frame and cutting out a significant piece of the market in that short time frame, right? Like you don't have time to wait till March of the subsequent year in order to get the new pricing strategy in. That's a flawed way of thinking because of the models that have been put in place to sustain the old model. That is going to be hard for people to adjust to. I get that. That's not going to change this year. That may, and that's like I said, the older companies, it wasn't Hilton who created Airbnb, right? The Hilton ain't going to change it now, complete cycle to address in the old days what Airbnb was. Same thing down here.
Yeah. And I think it will also be like this pricing strategy is probably going to be comprised of many strategies, right? Because maybe it's not enough having one motion, one way of doing it. I think for most companies, they will have to like find 5 ways of doing it and kind of excel in each of them. So yeah, it's going to be fun, right?
Yeah, that's why you bring it back to where we started, you know, also beautifully on time, I noticed. But we bring it back to where we started. It is a monetization strategy, and a monetization strategy can have multiple elements, multiple pricing strategies underneath of it, can have multiple payment strategies and so on. But the strategy and how am I monetizing the product that I'm selling over a horizon that I believe is that in the beginning you gotta guess, but eventually after, you know, you gotta put on. And I believe we know that those horizons for a platform is 5 years, for an application is between 2 to 3 years, and from some plugin that you put into Google browser, you could be anywhere from like 3 months to 12 months, right? These are horizons that we work with.
Can we state the key takeaway from today? Stay agile, focus on execution, do not stare blindly on the biggest players, neither on the newest players on the market. I think another key takeaway, most likely our next session will be hosted by an AI bot. So, right, I will be replaced. For our viewers, are you looking for some serious upgrade on your C-level on training management? Please contact Winning by Design from Jacco. It was an absolute pleasure having you here. Are you finally aware of what your pricing model should look like, and you're looking at the billing structure of things? You know where to find us. Thank you for today, and have a pleasant day.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.